Hello and happy National Poetry Month from all of us at the Troy Public Library. As you may or may not know, April is National Poetry Month, and since we're all relying so much more on Overdrive and Libby for our reading needs, I wanted to share with you some poems available in collections that you can borrow through Overdrive. There's no shortage of Billy Collins poetry available on Overdrive. These are some of the collections of poetry by Billy Collins that you can borrow. I'm going to read the title poem from The Trouble with Poetry because I think it's a really fun poem for National Poetry Month. The Trouble with Poetry. The trouble with poetry, I realized as I walked along a beach one night, cold Florida sand under my bare feet, a show of stars in the sky. The trouble with poetry is that it encourages the writing of more poetry, more guppies crowding the fish tank, more baby rabbits hopping out of their mothers into the dewy grass. And how will it ever end? Unless the day finally arrives when we have compared everything in the world to everything else in the world, and there is nothing left to do but quietly close our notebooks and sit with our hands folded on our desks. Poetry fills me with joy, and I rise like a feather in the wind. Poetry fills me with sorrow, and I sink like a chain flung from a bridge. But mostly poetry fills me with the urge to write poetry, to sit in the dark and wait for a little flame to appear at the tip of my pencil. And along with that, the longing to steal, to break into the poems of others with a flashlight and a ski mask. And what an unmerry band of thieves we are, cut purses, common shoplifters, I thought to myself, as a cold wave swirled around my feet and the lighthouse moved its megaphone over the sea, which is an image I stole directly from Lawrence Ferlinghetti, to be perfectly honest for a moment, the bicycling poet of San Francisco, whose little amusement park of a book I carried in a side pocket of my uniform up and down the treacherous halls of high school. The next poem I'm going to read is by Nikki Giovanni. It's from her collection Chasing Utopia, and I think it's a really good poem for challenging times like the ones we're facing right now. This is called Podcast for Bicycles. I loved before I understood. Love is a skill. I loved my mother's cool hands on my forehead. I loved the safety of her arms. I trusted before I understood the word. Mommy would say when I had fallen, "Come here, Nicky, and I'll pick you up." And I would wipe my eyes, push myself off my fat bottom, and toddle over to her for my reward. A kiss and a "That's my big girl." I am still a sucker for that one. But I grew up and learned trust and love are crafts we practice, our wheels we balance our lives on, our bicycles we ride through challenges and changes to escape and ecstasy. This little collection called Fierce Fairy Tales by Nikita Gill is one that I just happened upon when I was browsing Libby, but I like the idea of poems about fairy tales, so I thought I would read one of the poems from this book. It's called For the Cynic. Our current cosmic address is a small flying piece of rubble traveling through an endless black void, surrounded inexplicably by 7 other pieces of flying rubble. All of these pieces harmoniously rotate around the same giant fireball without ever crashing into each other or hurtling themselves into said fireball. And if that isn't random enough, out of all those pieces of rubble, ours is the only one that sustains an environment that gives life to billions of different life forms, including a multitude of flowering plants and oxygen-giving trees, a plethora of wildlife, and 8 billion human beings. And somehow you still genuinely think that magic does not exist, that fairy tales aren't real, that the way people find each other at just the right time, at just the right moment, isn't the most powerful sorcery. If you're more of a fan of older classic poetry, there's plenty of that available on Overdrive as well. This is a Penguin Classics anthology of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Aurora Leigh and other poems that you can borrow. I am going to read one of her sonnets from Sonnets from the Portuguese that's also anthologized in that book. I thought once how Theocritus had sung of the sweet years, the dear and wished-for years, who each one in a gracious hand appears to bear a gift for mortals, old or young. And as I mused it in his antique tongue, I saw, in gradual vision, through my tears, the sweet, sad years, the melancholy years, those of my own life, who by turns had flung a shadow across me. Straightway I was ware, so weeping, how a mystic shape did move behind me, and drew me backward by the hair. And a voice said in mastery while I strove, "Guess now who holds thee." "Death," I said, but there the silver answer rang, "Not death, but love." Lastly, I have another collection that I just happened upon when I was browsing poetry. It's the Villanelle collection by Elusive Me and Ferric Gray. I usually am not a fan of Villanelle's, but this one I thought was really cool. It uses the couplet from William Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 as the refrain, and it seemed like a very interesting appropriation of an older classic work of poetry in this form. So this is Villanelle on 18. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long as I can always hold your hand, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. If ever souls as two are one to be, 'twas always meant, obeying God's command, so long as men can breathe, or eyes can see. My love is strong, I ask on bended knee, 'tis true this time I yearned, this moment planned, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. My eyes, soon filled with tears, you hold the key to all I have, my hopes and dreams expand, so long as men can breathe, or eyes can see. Your answer to me, every pain would flee, for pain of love is hard to e'er withstand. So long lives this, and this gives life to thee. And time stood still, my utterance, my plea, now answered with a smile, you understand. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Thanks so much for listening to my virtual poetry reading. If you liked the poems I read, you can check out the books that they're from through Overdrive. You can also browse by just doing a quick search for poetry on Overdrive or Libby, or you can check out the Academy of American Poets at poets.org. They have a lot of great National Poetry Month news, poetry resources, and just some poems that you can read. So, I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, and I hope you have a happy National Poetry Month. Thanks again, guys.